Hello, and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, September 18th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. Ali Abunimah is away this week. It's day 713 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, Dr. Sami Al-Arian will join us to talk about Israel's bombing of Doha and the attempted assassination of Hamas's negotiating team, and what it will take to end the genocide. Later on in the program, Jon will cover the latest resistance news on the eve of Israel's planned Gaza City invasion. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine. Israel has killed at least 416 Palestinians and injured at least 2,200 between September 10th and September 17th, according to official records from the Ministry of Health in Gaza. Airstrikes across Gaza, concentrated in Gaza City, have been constant and relentless. Israel has continued to obliterate high-rise towers, apartment buildings, tent shelters, and entire families trying to flee on foot and in vehicles. Journalist Islam Badr filmed the missile strike on the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Mosque in the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 neighborhood of Gaza City on Tuesday. Israel attacked the beach refugee camp in western Gaza City this past week, shelling homes and shelters. Journalist Ayman al-Hessi documented an Israeli airstrike on a home in the beach camp on September 13th, which sparked fires inside adjacent buildings and structures. He said that over 3 days, the Israeli army attacked the camp with a barrage of shells and missiles. Gaza resident Jihad Madhoun captured this airstrike on a home in the camp on September 11th. On September 15th, Israel dropped the Gafri high-rise building in Gaza City. Reporter Ahmed Ibrahimi filmed this clip. The day before Israel struck the Mahna Tower, Ahmed Ibrahim uploaded this clip. Al Jazeera shared this video of an Israeli missile strike on a residential building in the Nasser neighborhood on September 12th. Videographer 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿 captured the moment an Israeli airstrike hit a building in the Rayas neighborhood on September 13th. That day, Israel also targeted the Palestine Stadium, where forcibly displaced families had sought shelter. Reporters Nahid Hajjaj and Saeed Hezbollah filmed the aftermath of the attacks as distraught parents rushed their injured children to Al-Shifa Hospital.
يابا ماشي يابا والله ماشي يابا أمانة أنا بس تعالوا الولد بالله عليك عارف الصارة جروا فجأة فينا وخلصنا مش عارف ايش صار انا يابا مش قادر أمانة والله بلاش كتر يا نتنياهو وين اعملوا كتر اخبط في الأطفال اخبط يا نتنياهو حسبي الله عليهم.
Israel also targeted a vehicle carrying displaced Palestinians, including children, on September 16th, engulfing it in flames and killing everyone inside. Ibrahim al-Khalili, a correspondent for Al Jazeera, reported from the Daraj neighborhood in Gaza City that same day. He had to report on the killing of many of his close family members.
Many Palestinians have been confirmed killed, and at least 50 Palestinians are still trapped under the rubble. Tragically, many of my close relatives were among those killed in this airstrike.
مش مشكلة يلا قول يلا
I'm here today reporting from Gaza's Al-Daraj neighborhood east of Gaza City, where deadly Israeli airstrike flattened this complete residential block behind me. Many Palestinians have been confirmed killed, and at least 50 Palestinians are still trapped under the rubble. Tragically, many of my close relatives were among those killed in this airstrike.
That was Ibrahim al-Khalili at Al Jazeera. Israel destroyed what was left of the Islamic University of Gaza, a prestigious institution that was one of the first universities to be bombed during the first few months of the genocide and had since been used as a makeshift shelter for forcibly displaced families. On September 14th, Israel shelled the already bombed-out buildings 3 consecutive times. Rami Abdu of Euromed Human Rights Monitor said that, quote, after the first and second shellings, a number of displaced people returned to the site to try to retrieve some of their belongings. In the third shelling, high explosive bombs were used that directly targeted the building. Dozens of victims and missing persons are still under the rubble up to this moment. Journalist Abdelaziz Khalil filmed this clip of the attacks. On Wednesday, Israeli forces bombed an area near the front gate of Al-Shifa Hospital, where displaced families have sheltered in tents. The attack killed at least 13 people and wounded many others. Video and images of the aftermath of the attacks, which I will not share here, show people strewn on the ground in pools of blood or being carried by others in total panic. The day before, on Tuesday, Israel targeted the area around Al-Shifa Hospital with airstrikes. Journalist Mahmoud Abu Salama reported from the aftermath of Tuesday's attacks. He said, quote, an Israeli massacre on this street, crowded with citizens and inhabited by residents. On this street, there are martyrs and wounded people. The street is full of residents, as you can see. Compounding the massacres and destruction, the Palestinian Telecommunications Regulatory Authority said telephone lines and internet connections were down due to Israeli attacks on several main network routes supplying the region. Euromed Human Rights Monitor said that this leaves Gaza City in total communications blackout, isolating around 800,000 Palestinians and silencing their voices as Israeli attacks escalate. Israel bombed the Rantisi Children's Hospital in Gaza City on Tuesday. Dr. Munir al-Bursh, the Director General of Gaza's Ministry of Health, reported that the specialized pediatric facility was struck 3 times in rapid succession, leaving 80 patients trapped in separate departments, including 4 children in pediatric intensive care and 8 newborns in neonatal care. He said, quote, it is a scene where patients' breaths mingle with the roar of explosives and mothers' cries with the whistle of rockets. Al-Rantisi Children's Hospital, once a house of healing, has today become a field of death. On Tuesday, September 16th, Dr. Ali Tahrawi, a physician in a hospital in central Gaza, uploaded a video to his Instagram showing a toddler who was brought in after an airstrike, her face blackened from burns and her torso ripped apart with her internal organs spilling out. We will not show that clip, but in his video, and I'll do my best to describe it here, Tahrawi stands beside the little girl in shock, not saying a word, while he and the hospital staff try to dress her gaping wound and watch her take her last gasping breath. Tahrawi wrote on Instagram, quote, 2 years into this hell, and I have never seen anything like what I'm witnessing now. These days bring the most devastating, heart-shattering injuries, wounds so severe you stand frozen, wondering if even God could save them. We stood helpless, not knowing what to do. I felt this little girl's final heartbeats with my hands, pulsing through torn flesh. If images of torn and broken children are not enough to stop this madness, then what is? I am ready to sacrifice my life for this cause. I will never stop struggling for my people. But how can I, when what we are facing is nothing but death and evil? 17 hours into my exhausting shift, carrying the weight of unbearable stories, families escaping death in the north, only to face more death here, and others arriving with injuries that could not be treated there. I finally lay down to rest my back, but then came another airstrike. Minutes later, the ambulances arrived with the wounded. Among them was this little girl. I saw her heart stop beating, and I feel mine will stop soon. My message to the world is simple. If we are left to burn in this hell alone, then humanity itself has already died. This world is no longer human, and the silence that allowed all of this will haunt you forever. Activist and social media creator Tommy Marcus, who goes by Quentin Quarantino, and is on board one of the dozens of boats in the global Samud flotilla on their way to Gaza, uploaded this clip on Wednesday. Marcus says that he got in touch with Dr. Tahrawi to ask about the girl's name, something many people asked about on social media, and received this response from him.
Like many of you, the video this morning of the young child gasping her last breaths as you see her intestines fall out really affected me. And as I saw my post gaining more traction, I thought that it may be a nice thing to find out what her name was and share that on my page. So I contacted the doctor who uploaded the video, Ali, and I asked him. And unfortunately, her parents and her newborn brother were all killed, murdered in the attack. And there was nobody to confirm her name. So I just thought I'd let everyone know that.
As Israel's carnage in Gaza City escalates without limits, the Gaza government media office estimates that nearly 200,000 residents have been forced to leave their homes under the threat of airstrikes and shelling. But the office says that more than 15,000 people returned to their neighborhoods earlier this week after failing to find adequate housing or basic necessities in the south. Photographer Mahmoud Abu Hamda compiled these clips of Palestinians being forced to leave Gaza City and the north over the past week. Al-Mizan Center for Human Rights reported that Israel's intensified attacks on multi-story residential buildings, quote, are part of Israel's plan to take over the city in a severe escalation of the genocide. Relentless and deliberate attacks on Gaza City's residential areas have generated a state of fear and panic among Palestinians, causing thousands to escape towards southern Gaza, particularly to Mawasi Khan Yunis. Most Palestinians fleeing Gaza City are forced to walk on foot, as transportation remains largely unavailable due to the lack of fuel, and in rare instances where transportation is available, the cost of moving their belongings soared to nearly $1,000. The extreme trauma of being forcibly displaced is compounded by the need to walk for hours on end, while also experiencing famine, leading to severe exhaustion. Israel is currently trying to concentrate Gaza's entire population into so-called humanitarian zones in southern Gaza that amount to only 12% of Gaza's total area, Al-Mizan adds. The Gaza government media office stated this week that, quote, the Al-Mawasi area, which currently shelters approximately 800,000 people and is falsely promoted by the occupation authorities as a humanitarian safe zone, has been subjected to more than 109 airstrikes and repeated shelling, resulting in over 2,000 deaths in successive massacres perpetrated by the occupation army within the Al-Mawasi area itself. These areas are completely devoid of the basic necessities of life, with no hospitals, no infrastructure, no essential services such as water, food, shelter, electricity, or education, making living there almost impossible, the media office added. John will have more on the forced displacement of Palestinians from northern Gaza later on in the program. Meanwhile, children and adults alike are continuing to die of starvation across Gaza. On Wednesday, the Gaza Health Ministry said it has until now recorded the deaths by starvation of 432 Palestinians, 146 of whom are children. One of the mechanisms that Israel and the United States have been using to impose and entrench starvation as a means of collective punishment and genocide has been through the private Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF. The United Nations Independent Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel, has found that the GHF plays a significant role in the genocide as it masquerades as a food aid distribution mechanism. Earlier this week, the UN Commission released a 70-page report that concludes that Israel, through its acts and intentions, is committing genocide against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The commission urged Israel and all states, quote, to fulfill their legal obligations under international law to end the genocide and punish those responsible for it. Quote, the intention of the Israeli authorities to continuously impose starvation and unlivable conditions of life for Palestinians in Gaza is also evident through the establishment and use of the GHF to maintain total control over aid distribution in Gaza, the report declares. Navi Pillay, the chair of the commission, read her remarks in Geneva on Tuesday as the report was published.
The goal of the Israeli government is abundantly clear as we continue to witness the destruction of Palestinians in Gaza. The Commission finds it is genocide. In our report, the Commission found that the Israeli authorities and Israeli security forces committed and are continuing to commit the following underlying acts of genocide against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. 1, killing members of the group. 2, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. 3, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. And 4, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. On the specific intent of genocide, the Commission concludes that statements made by Israeli authorities are direct evidence of genocidal intent. The Commission also concludes that the pattern of conduct is circumstantial evidence for genocidal intent, and that genocidal intent was the only reasonable inference that could be drawn from a totality of the evidence. Therefore, the Commission concludes that the Israeli authorities and Israeli security forces have the genocidal intent to destroy, in whole or in part, the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip.
Included in the Commission's report are documented testimonies of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli detention, particularly children who have been raped, sexually assaulted, and tortured by Israeli prison forces. Considering the evidence in totality, the Commission says it finds, quote, that the Israeli security forces have intentionally inflicted serious bodily and mental harm on the Palestinians in Gaza. In her remarks, Pillay added that, quote, Israel has flagrantly disregarded the orders for provisional measures from the International Court of Justice and warnings from member states, UN offices, human rights organizations, and civil society groups, and continued the strategy of destruction of the Palestinians in Gaza. The Commission finds that the Israeli authorities had no intention to change their course of action. On the contrary, Israeli authorities have persisted and continued with their genocidal campaign in Gaza for almost 2 years now. Israel must immediately end the genocide in Gaza and comply fully with the orders for the provisional measures of the International Court of Justice, she added. Chris Sidoti, a member of the commission, spelled out the failure by obligated member states to stop the genocide.
The most significant aspect of the interim orders of 26 January 2024 was that every country in the world was put on notice by the International Court of Justice that there was a plausible risk of genocide in Gaza. And if it had not happened before that, it certainly happened then, that every country in the world became obliged under the law to take action, not to speak fine words, to take action to prevent genocide. There can be no doubt whatsoever that that obligation was activated on the 24th of January 2024, if not before. And in response to your question, that applies as much to India as, Jamie, it applies to Germany and the United States, as it applies to my country and every other country.
Chris Sidoti of the UN Commission of Inquiry. Israel, not surprisingly, accused the United Nations commissioners of being anti-Semitic and proxies of Hamas. Here was Sidoti's response.
Israeli Foreign Ministry today decried a distorted and false report and said that three individuals, so referring to the Commission of Inquiry, three individuals serving as Hamas proxies, notorious for their openly anti-Semitic positions. Could you please comment on that?
These reports should be taken seriously, but honestly, the Israeli responses are becoming so boring. You know, they say the same thing every time. They're producing the responses by ChatGPT these days, and they spend so much money in the Foreign Ministry on propaganda, you'd think that they would actually come up with something original. I would want them to engage with the evidence, but they never engage with the evidence. They put the report into ChatGPT, and then they put out the standard response. So no one takes it seriously, and Jamie, you shouldn't either.
Turning quickly to the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces carried out mass arrest and abduction campaigns this past week in cities in the north, particularly in 𝐓𝐿 𝐿. Qassam Moadi of Mondoweiss reported that Israeli forces arrested at least 1,000 Palestinians in a single day on September 11th during a wide-ranging raid on 𝐓𝐿 𝐿. Quote, the raid came following a roadside bomb attack on an armored Israeli military vehicle earlier in the day, taking place near a checkpoint outside the city. The attack wounded 2 Israeli soldiers, according to the Israeli Army radio. The governor of the 𝐓𝐿 𝐿 governorate said that Israeli forces imposed a total closure on 𝐓𝐿 𝐿 and conducted a campaign of home searches across the city, describing it as a systematic policy. The Israeli army's response was one of collective vengeance, said Hussein Sheikh Ali, a 𝐓𝐿 𝐿 resident and local social activist. Ali told Mondoweiss that, quote, the occupation soldiers began to go from house to house, searching and damaging people's belongings. The Israeli army arrested hundreds of Palestinian men and youth in the streets, Ali said, picking them up at random based on who happened to be present at work or in the streets. Quote, they arrested most of them without even checking their IDs. They made them walk in a line down the street as Israeli forces directed them where to go. It was a show of force. That's from Qassam Moadi at Mondoweiss. The Palestinian Prisoners Society said that Israeli occupation forces have detained approximately 120 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank over the last few days and has continued to escalate arrest raids in Al-Khalil, Jenin, Qalqilia, and Nablus. Wafa said that at least 30 Palestinians were detained between Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning alone. The total number of detentions in the West Bank since the beginning of the ongoing genocide on Gaza has reached approximately 19,000, including more than 590 women and approximately 1,550 children. These figures include those who were kept in detention by the occupation and those who were later released, but do not account for thousands of detainees from Gaza, the Palestinian Prisoners Society explained. In addition to mass arrests, Israeli bulldozers destroyed Palestinian greenhouses in Tulkarem on September 12th. And elsewhere in the northern West Bank, Israeli forces carried out raids in and around Nablus this week. Wafa news agency reported that a young Palestinian man was injured on Tuesday evening during an Israeli military incursion into the town of Kusra, south of Nablus. Wafa's sources said that several military vehicles stormed the town and roamed its streets, sparking confrontations with local residents. Israeli soldiers attacked residents with live bullets, stun grenades, and tear gas canisters, injuring the young man with live ammunition. On Tuesday, 2 Palestinians were shot dead by Israeli soldiers in the village of 𝐓𝐿 and their bodies were withheld, according to Wafa news agency. We've published many features on the Electronic Intifada in the last week, but we wanted to highlight What is Sung Cannot Be Killed by Sami Al-Arian, writing from Gaza. Quote, "It's been 3 months since I listened to music. I haven't even sung to myself with my inside voice, which is what I always did in moments of sadness. The last tune I remember hearing and singing was 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜𝐿, Take Me With You to Jerusalem, during my music troupe's rehearsal for a concert that was going to be part of the annual Rosy October Festival. I take part in it every year. Music was my refuge from the ear-splitting rocket strikes. In Arabic, we call the ecstatic delight that we feel with music tarab, or enchantment, and I used to find a kind of tarab in the musical intros to newscasts, those that were then followed by news of a new massacre taking people and plants and places. I decided to use my voice and my guitar to bring a brighter tomorrow into children's dreams in the face of massacres and genocide. In March 2024, I set up a music tent where children could come to learn singing, performing, writing, and theater. I was with them every day until the army ordered our evacuation from that part of Khan Yunis. The dream was cut short, and with it, our togetherness. I didn't hear from the children for days, during which the Israeli military bombed the area. Eventually, we returned to the shelter, but only some of the children returned. Others did not. 20 of my students had been killed in the bombardment, I later learned. More had been injured. Our dream died with them. I decided not to bring new students to take the places of those who had been martyred. They are irreplaceable. Music is not an activity. It is a memory, a trace, a forever. Israel's genocidal war has not killed me yet, but it has killed the notions of humanity I once held to be truth. I would sing with the children and watch them smile, despite everything. One air raid was enough to destroy everything we had built and force us to move. The forced starvation would have extinguished the music tent if the bombs didn't. The children no longer have it in them to sing. They don't have it in them to hear or listen. Lining up for food or water is far more important now than any song of peace. The sounds they produce now are the rumblings of their empty stomachs, rumblings echoed throughout the city. But I did not write this to lament. I write to etch my voice into an eternity in the face of oblivion. The genocide did not mold me into a person who seeks survival. It made me a person who wants to be a trace, so that it can be said that in this land of forced starvation and annihilation, there was an artist who sang for hope, though he may not have harbored it. The song that is sung cannot be killed. Those are excerpts from What is Sung Cannot Be Killed by Sami Al-Arian, a musician, writer, and theater practitioner in Gaza on electronicintifada.net. It was translated by Hazem Jamjoom. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and resilience across Gaza. 9-year-old Banyas is a naturalist and has made videos on Instagram exploring Gaza's flora and fauna. Along with her cousin and her little brother, Iyas, she recently recorded this video at her grandpa's home in Gaza City, where she found a small insect friend in her cup.
Morning, guys. Today I'm in my grandpa's home in Gaza City, and you won't believe what I just found when I was drinking water in my cup. I found this little guy. This is the southern green stink bug. It's one of kinds of bugs? It's buzzing. It's buzzing. It's buzzing. Oh my god. It wasn't buzzing. It's trying, but her wings are soaking wet. That's why it can't. Poor little friend. She can't fly. I'm so sad I was her. Okay. Oh, and now we have a Yes here. He wants to see the stink bug. Yes really loves insects. What's that? It's a stink bug. What's that?
Before we welcome our next guest, we will pause for a moment to share some very sad news. On behalf of everyone at the Electronic Intifada, it is with great sadness that we share the news of the passing of Samira Ali Najjar, our colleague Ali Abunimah's beloved mother, who left this life unexpectedly on the evening of September 14th at the age of 87. Samira was born in Palestine in 1938 into a family from the ancient village of 𝐓𝐡𝐞, known for its rural Palestinian architecture, olive presses, arched doorways, and stone wells. She was a young girl of 10 years old when her entire family became one of hundreds of thousands ethnically cleansed by Zionist militias and torn from their homes in 1948. The family first found refuge in the Bekaa area of southern Jerusalem before Ali's grandfather took his family to Jordan, where Samira married Ali's dad, Hassan Abunimah. One of Ali's earliest memories of Palestine centers on his mother. He was a child not yet of school age and was wandering with her through the aisles of a London supermarket with his mother, Samira. He writes in his first book, "One day we were buying oranges and I pointed at some big, beautiful-looking ones. 'No, not those,' my mother said. 'They are from Jaffa. They are our oranges.' This made no sense to my 5-year-old mind. If they were our oranges, why couldn't we have them? My mother explained to me that the citrus groves of Jaffa belonged to Palestinians, to people like us, until the Israelis took them over. Samira belonged to a generation of Palestinian survivors of the Nakba, the 1948 catastrophe in which the Zionist invasion expelled nearly 800,000 Palestinians from their cities and villages to make way for the establishment of the Israeli settler colony. That surviving generation made great sacrifices to raise and educate future generations in spite of the catastrophe they had endured. Now their later years are marked by the haunting continuation of the Nakba, manifesting in the monstrous form of Israel's final solution in the Gaza Strip. Nothing threatens Israel and its state ideology, Zionism, more than the persistence of the memory carried by that generation and those they raised to remember Palestine and to seek justice and return for its people. We mourn the loss of Samira and offer our sincere condolences to Ali, his father, and Ali's sisters, as well as Samira and Hassan's grandchildren and all their family and friends. Samira was a gentle and kind soul whose warmth touched all those who knew her. Perhaps the truest testament to that is the family she lovingly nurtured and raised, who adored her and cared for her devotedly. She will be dearly missed. May Samira rest in peace. And you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague, Asa Winstanley.
Hi, Nora.
Hi, Asa.
Thank you for that, as always. It's incredibly difficult to hear all of that, and our condolences go to Ali and the whole family, and it's a tragedy and a crime that she never got to return to 𝐓𝐡𝐞, return to Jerusalem, return to her homeland. And I always remember, that same story that you just told from Ali's first book, One Country, where he's giving those memories, passing down those memories from his family, like so many Palestinians, holding the return as a sacred trust to be passed on between generations. And I always also remember Ali always saying that this generation deserves our fathers and our grandfathers, our parents and our grandparents deserve to return now. And it's every time a refugee passes away, it is a tragedy. It's a tragedy, and the tragedy and the Nakba is ongoing. The expulsion is ongoing, as we see so graphically illustrated in your news report, Nora, of the Israeli occupier demolishing the homes and the buildings in Gaza City day by day and step by step.
The level of cruelty is it's unfathomable. It is, in all the ways. Absolutely. Well, thanks. Yeah, you know, Ali's going to take some time, but he'll be back when he's ready, and we're all with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you introduce our guest?
Thanks, Nora. Well, you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Asa Winstanley here with my colleague Nora Barrows-Friedman. Earlier this month, Israel bombed Qatar's capital city, Doha, targeting Hamas's negotiating team, which had been meeting to discuss a US proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza. The Israeli airstrike on Doha occurred despite the fact that the country hosts the Al-Udeid air base, which is the largest US military installation in the entire region of West Asia, and it's the logistics HQ of the US occupation forces in Iraq. Trump's spokesperson later tried to weakly distance the US president from the attack, saying that it, quote, does not advance Israel or America's goals, and that he, quote, he felt, quote, very badly about the airstrike. But most analysts agree and say that it's almost impossible that the US did not green light the attack in advance in some capacity. Trump also said that he gave a full warning to the Qataris about the attack, implicitly admitting that he had prior knowledge. Meanwhile, 250 American lawmakers are on a propaganda visit to Israel. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar urged them to pursue expanded anti-boycott measures in their states. The lawmakers also planted 50 trees in the Nakba, a desert region in the south of historic Palestine. The 50 trees are said to correspond to each of the 50 US states, and the ceremony was organized by the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, which is a para-state organization which predates the establishment of Israel, and which has for more than a century used tree planting as a cover to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from their land. Well, joining us today to talk about all these political developments in Palestine and around the region is Dr. Sami Al-Arian, Professor of Public Affairs and the Director of the Center of Islam and Global Affairs at Istanbul Zaim University. Dr. Sami, welcome to the Electronic Intifada live stream, and it's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and my condolences to Ali and the family and the Electronic Intifada family.
Thank you, Dr. Sami. It's so good to have you with us. Let's start with talking about what happened in Doha recently, earlier this month. And this week, 60 Arab and Muslim member states gathered in Doha to discuss Israel's bombing of the Qatari capital. The attack drew criticism from Arab states, including Egypt, which has participated in the blockade of Palestinians. Do you think the Israeli attack on a U.S. ally will change the calculus of countries in the region and make them reconsider the reliability of the U.S.? How do you see this playing out?
Unfortunately, the meeting of the Arab and Muslim countries in Doha was very hot in rhetoric, but on substance, it was very, very poor. We saw that all the declarations that came at the end of this meeting did not attempt to anything that will make Israel actually blink twice about not repeating this act. Israel has been lashing left and right at all the different states in the region, not only ethnically cleansing Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, and committing a genocide inside of Gaza now for almost 2 years, but also doing the same in many other parts. It's been lashing out and striking at Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iran, and lately Tunisia and Qatar. I've looked the historical narrative of if has ever been a country that was fighting more than 5 countries at a time in the past century, and even Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan did not fight more than 4 countries or 5 countries at a time. So we see here that Israel taking advantage of October 7th, trying to establish its hegemony over the region. And by doing that, it wanted to decapitate as many leaders, but also to finish off or impact the resistance, or what's called the axis of resistance. And we saw the devastation taking place today in Gaza. Netanyahu has been telling his people and promising them what he calls total and absolute victory. And he's been unable to deliver except the carnage and the killing and the massacres. He's not been able to bring the resistance to its heel. And because he hasn't been able to do that, he thought that by going after the leaders outside, since all his attempts in the past, killing Haniya and Sinwar and the leaders of Hezbollah in Lebanon, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, or even leaders in Iran and others, did not bring him this absolute and total victory. He thought he has an opportunity now to do this. And by doing that, he crossed not just international law and many red lines, but even he embarrassed the United States, because he did it inside a country that is supposedly under the protection of the United States. It has the largest Air Force base outside the United States in Al-Aidid. And it is unconscionable that someone is going to say that the United States was not part of this, because there is no way the Israelis would be hitting Qatar and going through its airspace, as well as airspace of several Arab countries, which is all of them, particularly the Gulf countries, under the protection of the United States, without the United States Central Command knowing about it. So for Trump or others to imply otherwise is disingenuous, to say the least, if they're not totally complicit in it. He regrets it, but he regrets it because it wasn't successful. The fact of the matter is that Israel did hit the building where the negotiators of the so-called Trump proposal to end the war and to free the captives, they were supposed, under the pressure of the Qatari government, who were pressured themselves by the Americans, that the Hamas leaders must give a response within 24 hours. They were pressured. The previous day, they held a meeting with the foreign minister, who also the prime minister of Qatar, and they promised him that tomorrow evening, that is the day that they were bombed, they were supposed to have been killed, they will give an answer. And they met, and usually they met where they're supposed to meet. It just happened that day also they changed the protocol of protections, where the phones were in one building and the leaders were in another building, and the missiles that were hit latched on the phones, and that's where the building that not only it killed some Qatari personnel, but also some other civilians, the people who were just happened to be there. I think at least 6 people have been declared dead and several injured. The point here is that Israel has no compunction, has no problem committing any war crime whatsoever. We have a person here, he is not only a wanted war criminal, he's also a genocider, a perpetrator of genocide, but he also is a failure. And this is very important to note, that he has not been able, he promised so many things that he hasn't been able to deliver, and now he's doubling down. The problem here has been really in the White House, because Israel doesn't care about the United Nations General Assembly, doesn't care about the International Court of Justice, doesn't care about the International Criminal Court, doesn't care about the European Union. And why would they care about 57 countries coming together to even not promise or pressure or do anything of substance? The problem is what happened in Doha with these Arab and Muslim countries. They were not even a paper tiger. They were not even a paper cat. They could not even scratch or do anything of significance. And that has been the problem all along. Unless the Muslim and Arab countries start pressuring the United States, they gave Trump several months ago, as he claims, trillions of dollars. Unless they start pressuring them that this is unacceptable, including the striking of an American, so-called an American ally, where a U.S. airbase exists with thousands and thousands of American soldiers, and they didn't care about that, then obviously there is nothing to be said, except that the United States is a problem, and it has to be dealt with. And the problem is that when the Arab and Muslim countries met in Doha, they did not really deal with that problem in any way, shape, or form.
So, from what you're saying, Dr. Sami, it sounds like, I mean, I was chuckling to myself there where you called the Arab states not even a paper tiger. I mean, I think that's quite apt. But, you know, theoretically, I mean,
they're not even a paper cat.
Yes, indeed. It's very apt. I mean, it sounds like, from what you're saying, that there's no political will there from the leaders of the Arab states to actually do anything about this and to change anything. But theoretically, do they have any kind of leverage they could use if there was that political will, say, you know, in an ideal situation? Do they have any kind of leverage they could use to force a change and a course of action from the US administration?
Absolutely, they do. The problem is there is no sovereignty. There is no independence. Most of these leaders, unfortunately, and the countries are client states, and they're afraid that if they start using this leverage, that somehow they will either be deposed or that they will be somehow pressured in a way that they cannot sustain it. Let me just give you two tools that the US uses against the Arab and Muslim countries. Now, you have two types of countries. You have the rich countries, in which they have been pressure to invest trillions of dollars in the US economy. It's estimated the Gulf countries alone have upward of $2 trillion invested in the US economy. They know if they start taking different policies or policies that will displease the United States, that the US could actually go and confiscate that money in the same way they confiscated $300 billion of Russian money after the Ukraine war. So they are basically trying to not anger the US in any way, so that they will not be either deposed, because the US could actually undermine their governments, or actually confiscate money or bring problems for them. Several years ago, I think it was in 2018, where there was a law in Congress, a bill in Congress that passed. It's called the JASTA bill. The JASTA bill was aimed at Saudi Arabia. Basically, it allowed the American government to weaponize 9/11 by giving the families of the victims of 9/11 the ability to go to court and extort the Saudis out of literally trillions of dollars, but only if and only if the Secretary of State would allow it. In other words, when the Secretary of State would tell the courts that the families could actually go and file lawsuits against the Saudi government, then they can go thousands asking for trillions. So the Saudis understand that, and unfortunately, they have succumbed to it instead of pressuring them. Now, the other tool used against poor countries, those countries who do not have the oil money or the petrodollar that the US utilizes, it gives them money and load them with loans until they have enough loans that they can't repay. And then it comes and tell them, if they do not toe the line, if they do not challenge US policy or US hegemony, it's going to destroy their economies. In 2018, again, Trump tweeted 5 words to Turkey. He says, "I can destroy Turkish economy." The second day, the lira fell by 40%. Why? Because Turkey is loaded with $550 billion of loans that it can't repay unless they reschedule the loans or work out another terms for it. So most of these countries are not truly independent, even if they have the best of intentions, because they know about the consequences. So that's the answer to this part of the question. But what leverage they have? They have plenty of leverage. As I said, if the Arab countries stop, I wouldn't even call it stop, just ask for different kind of money than the petrodollar, because if they stop, if they can accept other currencies And then now there's a lot of noise about this, and the U.S. is very nervous about this. That will put a lot of pressure on the U.S. dollar, and within few months, not years, the dollar will crash, and that would be a huge problem for the U.S. They can also start withdrawing their investments. If they just draw 10% a month, I can guarantee you within 2 months, this war would stop tomorrow, if not within a week or two. There are a lot of things they can do. They can break relations, they can freeze relations, they can go after Israel in the United Nations. There's a lot to be done here, but the problem, again, there is no willpower because they are all afraid of what Uncle Sam would do to them.
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned at the beginning there's the issue of the military bases as well, right?
Absolutely.
The US power, military power is ensconced across the whole region.
There are 60 over, I counted about 63 military bases. There could be more. Israel just had another 6 military bases opened in the areas that they occupied after the Syrian regime fell. So you have military bases all over the place. And again, you have to go back and see what is the real goal here. The real goal here is to establish Israeli hegemony. That's from the Israeli standpoint. That's what they are working for, and to establish Greater Israel. But when you look deep down, both of these goals actually will be against U.S. interests, because what will happen if Israel indeed establishes this, and I think I have great doubt about the ability for them to actually establish hegemony or even establish Greater Israel, because I don't think that is also achievable. But let's assume that they do achieve that. That's going to be contrary to US policy and goals in the region. It's going to destabilize the region, and it's going to actually empower every country here to be afraid that they could be next. And therefore, I'm not sure what the Trump administration is thinking if they allow this to happen. Apparently, you have a White House who is as Zionist as not even as Likud, but even as Smotrich and Ben Gvir. They're trying to establish, and their ambassador expresses this every single day, Greater Israel. And what's going to happen to the Palestinians? They are actually lobbying very hard, many countries around the world, to take the Palestinians and displace them in different parts of the world. Just imagine what kind of a word that would establish if actually you're able to take 2 million Gazans and displace them in different countries, how that's going to appear. There is no international law anymore. There is no international standards or norms. We're talking about a genocide and ethnic cleansing that is unprecedented in modern history. I don't think they can pull it off, but they're going to end up with their reputation basically in the gutter, and that there will be, Nora was asking earlier, what would be the consequences? The consequences is that the resistance really has no options anymore. They are not going to negotiate under these circumstances. They know that what Israel and the United States are asking basically is for its demise. Ruby was very clear about that, and therefore they will fight to the bitter end. And to fight to the bitter end, that means the tragedy is going to continue. And since you have no options but to resist, then the change has to come from the people of conscience around the world. We are witnessing a genocide unprecedented in history. And when I say that, I say it fully knowing that what happened during World War II and others, there were obviously a tremendous amount of suffering and genocide and so on and so forth. But a lot of them were speculated. They were not being shown to the world day in and day out. People would see it. People would hear about it. People will gossip about it. But we know most of what happened after the war ended. But now,
the Holocaust was conducted in secret for the most part, right? Not very many people knew about it.
That's exactly right. Most of the stories that we know, most of the horrible stories we know about what happened then, it all came after the war ended, not during. But now we're seeing it. So we are witnessing the actual perpetrators, and we're seeing also how the world is reacting, and it is shameful on the whole world. But we have to put where the who the actual perpetrators are, you know, they basically are Israel and the United States, and the whole world is just watching, which does not absolve them from the responsibility of stopping this. But what we have to do about it is to awaken the world's conscience and continue the campaign of pressure until this horrible war ends.
I mean, it really feels like we've entered into this new phase, this new world where a genocide can be live streamed for 2 years. The negotiators can be targeted for assassination in a host country that is allied with the U.S., and there will be no consequences. The prime minister of a different country, Yemen, and his entire cabinet can be assassinated with barely a peep from, you know, the so-called international community. The United Nations can declare that it's a genocide. The International, you know, Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice can both, you know, issue warrants and declare genocide and say that, you know, member states have an obligation to stop it. The only state that is stopping it is Yemen, which is being bombed by the genocider state. And like, how do we understand what is left of the, you know, the ghost maybe of the so-called international rules-based order, international law at this point? And where does, I mean, what is the future of so-called political negotiations if one rogue state that is committing a genocide is allowed to try to assassinate the negotiations team? How do you see this? What reality are we now in?
There is no more international system. The international system, which was established primarily by the United States in the aftermath of World War II, that was leading it for most of the past 80 years or so. It has established international institutions in order to establish an American empire and global hegemony within the rules that it set itself, and it set these institutions. That system has come and crashed down after October 7th, and it primarily because of not only of the Zionist regime's behavior and conduct and genocide, but because the United States allowed it to happen. And it allowed it to happen, by the way, by both administrations, Democratic and Republican. You can't just blame Trump on this. You have to put it in the context of this whole U.S. global system that it established. Both administrations allowed it to be crashed down, or to crash down. And in this situation, where do we go from here? Obviously, that's going to depend pretty much on how this war ends. If this war ends with Israel having, and I don't believe that's the case, but let's assume that Israel ends this, what they call total victory, that they are able to impose their will and establish greater Israel, and all these illusions that they are trying to establish, then obviously we are in a world where might is right, and therefore, you know, you live in the law of the jungle. There is no laws anymore. Anybody can do whatever they please. Israel wants a complete free hand in the region. It wants to dictate to every country in the region how they should live, what kind of political system they should have, what kind of military they should have. It wants to fragment Syria into 4 different countries: a Druze, an Alawite, a Sunni, and the Kurdish regions. It wants to impose a different different geopolitical system in the region, and wants the United States basically to back it all the way. It wants to dictate who can have what kind of technology and who can't have this kind of technology, what kind of parties and political groups can exist and what they can't exist, who would be called a legitimate and who would be called illegitimate, and all that. So this is one country, basically. You call it a rogue country, but it wants to impose its hegemony and to be above the law. So you will have 2 countries in the world who will be totally above the law, and they will tell what everybody else what the law that they should be adhering to is going to be. That's one system that they're trying to impose. The other system is that you have to change what it means to live in a lawful or a legal system or a legal regime around the world. Now you could see, for instance, in the BRICS different institutions, whether they are political or economic, they're trying to very slowly come up with a legal system and with an economic system and with a trade system and with a political system that would be more representative of the people. The United States wants to ignore this, but I think the overriding situation here is that China, which is very slowly leading this transformation, does not want a direct confrontation with the United States, and it wants to establish this regime over time. You know, they call it strategic patience. But of course, Gaza cannot wait for that, and many other countries can't wait for that. So you have now, we're living into a transient period, the period between this lawless situation that was imposed on the world because of the Israeli behavior and American complicity. And we have this transformation or this new world that is being formed right now, mostly in the global south, in addition to China and Russia. And they're trying to come up with this system, which for the most part, Europeans and Americans are ignoring. So where does it take us? It would take us, I believe, whether accelerated or in reverse, depending on the outcome of the Gaza war. That's why the Gaza war is beyond simply the survival of the Palestinians or what's happening to the Palestinians. It's really the survival of the whole system in the world. People talk about two-state solution now. Now, somehow this became very attractive to many countries around the world. After ignoring it for 3 decades, and they're trying to salvage whatever could be salvaged in their view of the Zionist project. The Zionist project has come to its end. And when you come to your end, you start lashing out and committing all kinds of crimes, all kinds of atrocities, all kinds of massacres, thinking that this is going to save you. But in fact, it delegitimizes your existence to the point that you no longer could be supported by anyone. The only friend that the Israelis have today, and when I mean only, I mean it, it's just the US and some of the stooges around the globe. Some of these countries that they got their independence from the US, but they get budgets from the US, Nauru, Marshall Islands, got those, these small countries that have few thousands living here and there. And everybody else is on the other side. How can you survive in a world like this? Al-Aqsa it's an eye-opening, and it has devastated certainly Gaza and the Palestinians. And we can talk about that. And your news report was taken about much of the suffering taking place today, unprecedented. But at the same time, it has exposed the Zionist enterprise and the Zionist regime to the point where it becomes extremely difficult for any person, rational person or person of conscience, who can defend what they are doing there. And when you see, that's the silver lining you could see that this is not going to be a panacea. This is not going to be an answer. Greater Israel is not going to be established at the ruins of everybody in this region. That we are dealing with madmen. We're dealing with genociders. We're dealing with people who have no legitimacy, actually, because they've lost not only their humanity, they lost any rationality when they come and target babies and buildings and trees and everyone in Gaza and the region, thinking that this is how they're going to establish deterrence and this is how they're going to establish hegemony, and by that they can feel that somehow they are safe. That's beyond being crazy. That is just really sociopaths we're dealing with, and I don't think the world would accept such state, because that's going to doom everyone, not just the genociders.
Well, Dr. Sami, you mentioned there the so-called two-state solution, and recently several Western countries have been moving towards a recognition of the so-called Palestinian state, in reality recognition of the Palestinian Authority. Now, of course, at the same time, Israel is moving from de facto control of the occupied West Bank to a more explicit ambition of de jure annexations, that is, annexation in law, in the actual Israeli law. Why do you think this is happening now, and how do you view the situation on the ground?
Let's recall how we got to this point of two-state solution, because Israel, when it was established back in 1948, it was established on the notion that there will be a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Palestinians, the natives of the land, rejected this. There were only 6.5% of the land was under Zionist possession. And that is not a figure I'm making up. This is the figure that the United Nations actually, when they sent a commission to find out how much the Palestinians or the Arabs owned and how much Jews owned at the time, it was determined that they only have 6.5%. And they were trying to allot 55% of the land under so much pressure from the Zionists, particularly in Britain and the United States, to give them a shot at having a Jewish state. The Palestinians rejected that and said, we accepted the presence of Jewish immigrants from Europe because Europe was racist and was persecuting its Jews, but we're not going to accept these people to come and have sovereignty and take our land. And then the Zionist movement, which was preparing for this moment under a 30-year mandate, British mandate, in which Palestinians were prevented from even owning a gun, and they were subjected to all kinds of laws that will have execution, that the court will execute any Palestinian who was even owning a gun. And by the end of this process, 78% of Palestinian land was taken by the newly formed Zionist state. Then in 1967, they went after the whole thing because that was the plan all along. And then we had the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, in which the PLO, which was chaired by different Palestinian factions, found themselves in the cold because they sided with Saddam. And they were told by the United States then, that was the first Bush administration, if they can accept a Jewish state or an Israeli state, they can get something. And of course, that path started right after the 1973 war. But keep in mind that the PLO was established in 1964. It was not established to have a Palestinian state in 1967 because it was established before 1967. And that meant that they want to liberate Palestine and get the Palestinians back. But they accept this, in a very bitter way in 1988 after the first Intifada by the prodding and the pressure of the US. And then by 1993, they had an agreement, which is called the Oslo Accord, which was predicated on the understanding that, okay, the Palestinians who signed that at that time, Yasser Arafat and his colleagues, that they will accept Israel on 78%, provided that Israel will give back 22%. That was termed the two-state solution. Keep in mind that was what the Palestinians signed, which basically was recognizing Israel. That is the current borders of Israel at the time. The Israelis signed that the PLO would be the spokesperson that will speak on behalf of the Palestinians. That's it. They did not agree to a two-state solution. And throughout these negotiations that started with agreements in 1994, that they were supposed to conclude in 5 years in 1999, which they didn't. And then they had a Camp David, which did not present the Palestinians with anything that would even give this minimum. The Israelis always had in mind that they want to absorb this land piece by piece. And they were never serious about two-state solution. Even in the aftermath of, or in the waning days of the Obama administration in December 2016, John Kerry, who was the Secretary of State at the time, gave a speech in which he says the two-state solution is dead, and it's dead because of Israeli settlements and Israeli policy. He just said that. So this notion that there is a two-state solution, that somehow there is a horizon for a two-state solution, is just an illusion. Everybody knows it's dead. Everybody didn't do anything about it. Everybody knew that they put everything in the hands of the Americans, who were just basically whatever the Israelis want, they gave them. They never really pressured them in a way that they will make it happen. And that's where we ended up. Israel had to choose 2 out of 3 things. They wanted to be Jewish, they wanted to be democratic, they wanted the whole land. Well, if you want to have a land and be called democratic, that's a one-state solution, one man, one vote. No, we can't have the Arabs with us. We are the chosen race. We have to have our Jewish. Then you have to have Jewish. Then you need the majority Jewish. That means you give the Palestinians something, 22%, and you become a Jewish majority and democratic. No. We want the land. So they wanted all 3. So they ended up with apartheid, because you have a domination of one race or of one people over the other. But that's a problem. Over the long term, no one is going to accept apartheid to be the order of the day. So now they found an opportunity with this current situation, is that we can keep the land, we can keep calling ourselves a Jewish state, we can keep calling ourselves a democratic state, we can get rid of the Palestinians through genocide, through ethnic cleansing. Let's do genocide in Gaza, get as many Palestinians out of Gaza as possible. We'll follow that up with another ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. We've solved all 3. Now we kept the land. We can call ourselves Jewish. We can call ourselves democratic, and hell with the word. Who cares about the word? That's the situation we're in. So this, for people to come now and act like this 2-state solution was an option all along, is just disingenuous, to say the least, if not totally laughable. The current administration, the current Palestinian Authority, in the form of Mahmoud Abbas, you can't find any person among the Palestinians ever, not in the past, I don't think even in the future, possibly you can find someone who will collaborate completely with what you want. He's willing to sign whatever it takes, but what they're offering him cannot be called any kind of this. But again, the Israelis never had any intention to give the Palestinians anything. Now you have Smotrich and Ben Gvir joining the government, which is the most racist, fascist, Nazi type government in the history of that state. He came, they were empowered in December 2022. In January 2023, just within few weeks of coming to power, he said Palestinians have 3 options. 1, they can submit to a Jewish state, to Jewish law, that they can't have civil or political rights. They can live here at our leisure, at our permission, and they have to submit to that. They have to know this, and they have to live with it, which is basically a 3rd, 4th, 5th class citizen. And if they don't accept it, and he said, I understand that, they can be compensated and they can leave. The 3rd option is death. This is one of the reasons why we had to fund Al-Aqsa. Palestinians had no horizons whatsoever. Sinwar, who was ruling Gaza in 2017, tried everything in his power to try to find a solution. Gaza was under siege for 16 years. He tried to say to Mahmoud Abbas, come and take it, come and rule it, and try to lift the siege. He couldn't, because the Americans would not allow him to. The Israelis would not allow him to. He will have this great march of return in 2018, in trying to tell the people, we are peacefully demonstrating, do something about this siege, do something about our people. Everybody ignored them. They were killing them. Dozens and over hundreds of people were killed during that march. He came and offered Israel a truce. He said, let's have a truce, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, lift the siege, and let's see what we can do about this. Let's negotiate. And I give full permission. This is Sinwar now. I will give full authority for Abbas to go and negotiate. The Israelis entertained this because they liked the fact that they could have a Gaza administration, West Bank administration, so that they can continue with their plan of trying to annex Palestine and settle piece by piece. So, and then at the end, he tried everything and didn't help. And that's what you had October 7th. It was a prison break. It was people who, you were just boiling them, and finally they will explode. That's what we have. There is no 2-state solution for the Europeans and the Arabs to come and hide behind this, because no one wants to confront Israel. No one wants to confront the United States. They know that this is not going anywhere, that these are just vain political victory, that they're not going to reach. I mean, it's good to have that. It's good to have the whole world on one side and the US and Israel on the other side. That's great. But the question is not that. Will it actually be implemented? And if it's not going to get implemented, so what are they going to do about that? What's the next step? Nothing. That's the problem. For 30 years, since Oslo now, 32 years, has there been any repercussion, any consequence for Israeli refusal, for the Israeli intransigence, for the Israeli belligerence ever. They bomb Syria, they bomb Lebanon, they bomb Iraq, they bomb Tunisia, they bomb Qatar, they bomb, of course, the West Bank. I mean, can anybody see beyond what we can see in Gaza today? I don't think there is anything beyond that in human history that people could see, as Nora says, live streaming a genocide. Nothing is being done to them. So why would they care about two-state or whatever you care? They don't care. You look at what with Russia. They can't even play a soccer game. Israel, they can play soccer. They can have music festivals. They can send delegations. Of course, it's great that part of the world is waking up today. And I think over time, they're going to be isolated. But the question is, would it be enough? Well, that remains to be seen. I think our battle is not only in Palestine, our battle of the United States. The people in the United States, they will have to see what's actually being done in their name. You have to break this grip, this Zionist grip on American policy. I personally think that they have, with the Epstein file, because it does not, it's not rational what Trump is doing. He has basically sold out completely to some maniac. And they must have something against him. I mean, the more you look into this, the more you're sure of this. I mean, with his history and with his behavior and with his, friendship with Epstein and all that. So how can you allow politicians? You got 250 people going there, kissing the behinds of this small state that will actually, you're the laughing stock. America is the laughing stock of the world. Not only that people resent such policy, but they laugh at it. They don't see America as a superpower or as a leading power or as someone who could actually be emulated or even admired or somebody who can lecture people on democracy and human rights and the rule of law and all that. All that is nonsense, and that's what's happening to the world. So this whole notion, people are waking up after Tufan al-Aqsa, after October 7th, to the world that they see back, what they were living under for the past 30, 40 years as being a lie, just a big lie. And therefore, they want to have change, not only change, radical change, because they can't accept their current realities anymore. That's going to take time. You look at Americans who are under 30 today. I just saw a report about even Republicans under 30. Only 24% Republicans now support Israel. That means the overwhelming majority of Republican youth are detesting what Israel is doing, not only in Palestine, but also what's doing inside the United States. So for that to take place, when you talk about this in 10 years, 20 years, these people are going to become the leaders, the decision makers of tomorrow. And that's why they are terrified. That's why they think this is our perfect opportunity to go and establish greater Israel, because before it becomes too late. But I think it's too late already. I think they have been exposed. They have been shown to the whole world that what we're dealing with here are people who are the highest or the epic of everything that is wrong in the world, everything that is evil in the world, and therefore people of conscience are starting to do something about it. I think the political class is the last to change. Usually, you go through 4 phases for every transformation, for every change. You start with the people, and after you have enough people speaking out and standing up, it goes to the media, and with the media, then you get slowly the political class, and the final change comes from law. Because that's how things are in the United States. Now we've got the people, and this is going to increase. This is going to be more, not less. And slowly, media outlets like yours and others, and even some of the right-wingers are starting to speak out. And that's great. And then very slowly, we're going to get some of the political class. And finally, that's when a big change will take place. But also it has to come from the region, not just from your side of the world.
Dr. Sami, we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to kind of get your take on the escalating and always intensifying crackdowns on activism, and particularly student activism on campuses across the U.S. this is, the 250 U.S. lawmakers who are on a propaganda visit to Israel being encouraged by high-level Israeli war crime suspects to crack down on free speech rights in their own states back home. This is after, of course, decades of legislation at the local, state, and federal levels across the country designed to silence criticism of Israel. Dr. Sami, you, of course, were targeted in the U.S. for your activism and speech more than 2 decades ago. You were indicted by the U.S. in 2003 for alleged support of the Palestinian armed group 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿. Despite the U.S. spending millions on a lengthy and absurd trial, a federal jury could not convict you on a single count. And then after a decade of pursuing you and your family in this vindictive prosecution, the U.S. eventually dropped all charges and deported you to Turkey. What do you make of the current U.S. crackdown on anti-genocide activists in the U.S. today? And, they're now, the U.S. government is now trying to deport Mahmoud Khalil, the grad student from Columbia University, who is in ICE detention for 100 days. They want to deport him to Syria or Algeria. How do you see all of this? And what does that say about, the state of so-called free speech in this country?
Well, it's another attempt by the desperate Zionists to silence pro-Palestinian activism in the United States. For many years, they were ignoring these voices. But when some of these voices got enough attention from the political class, like what happened with me, they took advantage of 9/11 in order to silence me and others. But now it's coming to a very critical situation where it's not just the political class that could actually be influenced. We're talking about the whole sea of change within the U.S. population. That's a huge problem for Zionists. And they don't know how to handle it. I mean, they have really, really big problem with handling it. They thought in the past they can ignore it. They can't ignore it anymore. They thought that they can go through some underhanded tactics, firing people from their jobs, going after them in the media, calling them anti-Semite, whatever. That's not working anymore. Even the media now is turning them. The media can't ignore forever the fact that you have a genocide. Not even the New York Times and the Washington Post, despite their slanted reporting, or CNN and other media outlets. Forget about Fox, because they are in that corner. So when you look at all this, they're having real problems. So their last straw is to go after them by frightening them, by scaring them, by putting them in jail. It's the same thing that in the past, even though this is much worse than what was in the past called the McCarthy era, this is much, much worse, actually. In the McCarthy era, you still had the government, even though they were using it, it was there for a few years, but at the end they have to back off because the whole thing was not working. And it came at the same time that you have a civil rights movement in which they had to give in. And you still had some also politicians who were not necessarily buying this this kind of episode, this kind of story. Now you have a problem because the politicians now will have to make choices. And we see that because the people are involved in a big way now, that could actually take place. And that is frightening them. Look at what's happening in the New York mayor race, with Mamdani. If he gets elected, that's a huge thing. That means the people now are starting to see what it means to be an independent, to be patriot, to be somebody who cares about the country versus someone who sold out to the Zionist narrative and sold out to the Zionist power and Zionist money. And again, that will make, because that's what they relied on. They relied on the ignorance of the people. They relied on the media being in their corner that they can control and they can dictate to, and they relied on political money in which they can buy off politicians. Now, all that is being dismantled one by one, and that's what you're seeing today. What you're seeing is the reaction to this possibility that the youth could actually change in a very fundamental way, and they're going to lash out with every possible tool at their disposal. They're going to have the FBI going after people. They're going to have the police, the local police. They're going to have the these big companies and media outlets and the government, but they will fail, because that's too late for now. I think people have seen what's happening in Gaza, and they have woken up, and now they understand that this is a country that has been hijacked by these forces, and they're trying to take their country back. That's going to be a struggle. There will be a lot of victims, and there will be a lot of people who will pay heavy price. But I think it's within the American people to make that change. I just want to say one more thing, if I can, because you asked me about the two-state solution earlier, because I think the two-state solution is it's not a solution at all, because the Zionist movement and the Zionist regime have exposed themselves to be this kind of genocidal polity and genocidal people, and therefore for them to act like that they can coexist with others is just not correct and not true and not believable. And therefore our only solution, people have to come to this realization, whether now or whenever they think about this deeply, is that the only way we have to go the route of how apartheid ended in South Africa. We have to dismantle the institutions of apartheid in order to get a just society in even though they have problems, but to get a just society, you have to go after the institutions. And therefore our solution to the problems in Gaza, in Palestine, is that all these Zionist, racist, supremacist institutions must be dismantled. And therefore we need to think not as a Palestinian problem. We need to have a paradigm shift. This is an Israeli problem that the whole world must unite in confronting. We need to confront these Zionist structures. We need to dismantle the Zionist structures. And therefore, that's the only solution, so that justice could be reestablished in the Holy Land and reestablished around the world. And as long as you have Zionist institutions, these supremacist minds who would like to be the hegemon, not only Palestine, not only in the region, but in the whole world. They want to dictate to the Americans what they think and what they say and what they write and how they live. That cannot be accepted. Now it's affecting you. It's affecting your right to think and your right to speak and your right to assemble and your right to associate and your right to buy or not buy, to boycott or not boycott. That is just not the life that you want. These structures have to be dismantled. These structures have to be confronted. And for them to be confronted, people have to start thinking deeply about these modes of resistance in order to bring these structures down.
Yeah. Dr. Sami Al-Arian, we always learn so much from you and are always so grateful for your analysis. And we'd love to have you back on sooner rather than later. Thank you so much for being on the Electronic Intifada live stream today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'll be very delighted to come at any time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Sami.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. There's always so much to chew on.
Yeah.
After listening to Dr. Sami, so I'm really
I mean, we
really
could
grateful.
go for another hour with him.
Always.
Probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's bring Jon on. Hey, Jon.
Hello. Great interview.
Yeah. Thanks. So much has happened in Gaza. There's a communications blackout, as we mentioned in the news report, but I'm assuming that there have still been some videos that the resistance has been able to get out in the last week. Give us a sketch of what you're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, I mean, what you covered in the news is largely what's going on in Gaza. It's an attack on civilians at this point, but it's the lead up to the second battle of Gaza City. So we will chart the beginnings of that and a couple more, an operation from Jabalia from last week, and touch on the West Bank and Yemen as well.
Amazing. All right, well, take it away, Jon.
All right. So you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I'm Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 713 of Israel's genocidal war in Gaza. I will be breaking down another hand-delivered explosive through the turret of a Merkava tank in Jabalia later on in the show. We'll also touch on the West Bank and Yemen. But as always, let's take a look at the maps first here. We can see that the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs map now shows Gaza as a completely under complete expulsion orders. So you can see the purple runs from the from all the way through Gaza City. That announcement came this week. And we are now in, according to the Israeli military, day 3 of Operation Gideon's Chariots Part 2. The invasion formally began, according to the Israelis, on Tuesday. They announced it to CNN, not to their local media, which their local media was made a point about. And the defense minister, the Israeli defense minister, boasted that Gaza City was burning on the heels of 100 Israeli Air Force airstrikes in the first 12 hours after the announcement, which brought the number to over 1,000 airstrikes in just over a week in Gaza City alone, a tempo of operations that we have not seen in some time. And of course, that's just airstrikes. I say this every week, but those numbers are just airstrikes. They don't include naval shelling. They don't include artillery, tank shelling. They don't include their quadcopters that are carried out at a company level, taking hand grenades and dropping them from quadcopters onto tents and burning them. Doesn't include the M113 tank bombs, the robot bombs that are being sent in ahead of the armored vehicles. So that's just airstrikes. And of course, as Nora reported in the news, there's a communications blackout in Gaza, which is at least in part due to the fact that Israel has been dropping every tall tower that had that had connections on them. And so information is being spotty right now in the north. And there's no pretense of fighting here. The Israeli military is not saying they're fighting the resistance. In fact, they haven't even said that they've stepped out of their tanks yet. This is day 3 of the operation, and it's still, there's no way you could tell the difference in Gaza City between day 3 or 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. The Israelis have been killing 100 people a day. They're killing people in tent camps. They're killing people. They're targeting hospitals. They're targeting the roads that they've asked people to evacuate on. And the Israeli defense minister calls this, quote, fighting valiantly, which is really interesting statement from the defense minister, who is a Netanyahu toady and not a military person, but to say that this is brave fighting by the Israeli military, who are just raining down American explosives onto civilians, is very telling. So far, there's only 2 divisions of the planned 5 divisions that are supposed to be participating in the second battle of Gaza City. The Israeli military spokesperson says that they expect that there'll be several months of battle and then several more months of erasure in Gaza, as we have seen everywhere else that these fights have been, like Rafah, where they completely destroy the area as the military strategy, not fighting the resistance, but fighting against infrastructure, as they call it. But we know that that just means civilian homes. We could take a look at the number 2 here with the zoom in on the north and just see what we're talking about here. See complete evacuations orders all over the north, 82% in shoot-to-kill zones. This is from the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. They put these maps out once a week, and they come with a bunch of stats, and I'll read you some of those that were in this week's. Reported damage, 78% of all structures are destroyed or damaged. That's as of mid-July, so that's 2 months dated. 90% of the commercial of the commerce and industry segments of the economy are completely destroyed. 81% of the roads are destroyed. 100% of the population is in phase 5 of the IPC famine. Shelters, 36,000 housing units damaged or destroyed. That's 92% of the Gaza Strip's housing units have been destroyed. And the government media office said in just the last month, since the middle of August, there's been 1,600 residential buildings, 13,000 tents, and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of more. We can look at the number 3 is the Israeli evacuation notice, the top that says, we are publishing the areas that people can go to. This is the official notice. There was local notices delivered all over, dropped from quadcopters in localized areas, but this is the overall notice that the Israeli military gave. It's the second part says the areas that people can go to are Nusrat, Barej, Maghazi, Deir al-Bala, and Western Khan Yunis. There was strikes in Nusrat yesterday. So they're targeting areas they're telling people to leave to. At the bottom, it says the IDF is determined to resolve the battle against Hamas and will act with great force, proceed immediately to the listed areas. And so as they did that, Nora reported in the newscast, they hit cars on the road evacuating. So these evacuation notices are no more useful than they were at any other point in the war. We still have the Israeli military establishment fighting with the political establishment about the military not wanting to fight in Gaza City, not thinking they can defeat �BASM in Gaza City, and the fact that there's no talk anymore about the captives, the Israeli soldiers who are left. All of the captives left are Israeli soldiers. And there was a fight between the chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, and Ron Dermer, who's Netanyahu's point man on the file, before going to the starting Operation Gideon's Chariots 2 the other day. Zamir said, why isn't the negotiating team traveling around the world to force a deal? Why don't we? And he says to the Mossad chief, why are you sitting here in the room? Go and get a deal. Of course, ignoring the fact that Israel just a few days earlier had bombed the negotiators and attempted to kill all of the negotiators in Qatar, as we just heard from Dr. Sami Al-Arian. If you didn't catch that interview, you should check it out. Looking at number 4, we can see the migration map. This map was actually updated just a few minutes ago while we were on air. The map we're looking at here shows 191,200 people displaced. We're looking at a map of the north of the Gaza Strip, and you can see a bunch of lines, and each of those lines represents a community that has been evacuated. Each of those lines that you're seeing represents thousands of people driven out and displaced. The numbers today were updated to 246,800. And again, this is the migration cluster. This is a group of NGOs and UNRWA and the International Office for Migration. The Norwegian and Danish refugee councils are in on this site cluster as well. But this is a catastrophe. We talked about it last week, but people don't have what they had the first time the catastrophic evacuation of Gaza City happened. There's no currency in Gaza. There's no fuel. There's no food. There's no places on the way down to the south for food or fuel or water. And to have this expulsion happening at this point right now is a catastrophe in every way. If we look at the next map, you can see that this is what the roads look like. This map was released this week, and you can see that what you're looking at here is the road grid in particularly this is northern Gaza and central Gaza. The red areas are completely destroyed. So you can see on the left side of that map that you have a block of all red. So it's just the roads are completely destroyed in that area. Gaza City is above that red block. So everyone going from Gaza City is traveling on destroyed roads. This is from UNOSAT, the United Nations satellite network. And the orange is mostly destroyed and the yellow is partially destroyed, and you can see all the way down that is the case. And this has been going on. This destruction of the roads have made it very difficult for people to get down south. It's created massive traffic jams, and again, there's a lack of cars. People have lost their vehicles. They've lost everything. And they're on the road right now. 80% of the roads have been destroyed. That's data from July. So you know that there's been 2 months of erasure since then. And the government media office pointed out that the area that people are supposed to go to, Mawasi, that the Mawasi area, falsely promoted by Israel as a humanitarian safe zone, now shelters roughly 800,000 people, but has been struck by over 109 air raids, leaving more than 2,000 dead in successive massacres carried out by Israeli forces inside Mawasi itself. Mawasi lacks all basic necessities: no hospitals, no infrastructure, no roads, no water, no food, no shelter, no electricity, no education, making life there nearly impossible. The areas marked on the Israeli maps as shelter zones now amount to only 12% of Gaza's territory, upon which people are supposed to be, the 2 million people in Gaza are supposed to be crammed into concentration camps. So that was the government ministry in Gaza sending that statement out. But let's take a look at the resistance. Let's start in northern Gaza. We could see, we have a zoom in on that map. Sorry, I meant to flip this map. You can see here more clearly the red destroyed roads make it impossible to go from the mostly destroyed yellow roads down to the south. So that's the zoom in of that same map. And you can see why getting out, even for people who want to leave, is very difficult. But that people who are leaving right now are representing less than 1/3 of the population in Gaza City. And many people have said that they are not leaving Gaza, despite what the Israelis have been doing to try to get them to leave. So let's take a look now at that map from the north. Just to point out that these maps and evacuation notices that Israel gives have no legal authority, but the previous chief of staff, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿, the chief of the Israeli military who oversaw the first 17 months of the genocide, he gave a speech in southern Israel the other day in the Gaza envelope that was reported on by 𝐓𝐴𝐿 and then picked up and translated by The Guardian, where 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿 took credit for more than 200,000 casualties in Gaza. He called it 10% of the Gaza population. And he said that not once was a military operation inhibited by legal advice. Quote, "Not once has anyone restricted me, not once." 𝐓𝐴𝐿 told 𝐓𝐿 said that, 𝐓𝐴𝐿 Aeronaut, the newspaper, said that 𝐓𝐿 told the audience that the main importance of Israel's military lawyers was to convince the outside world of the legality of Israel's actions, the actions of the IDF. 𝐓𝐿 says, quote, "They are legal advisors who say, we will know how to defend this legally to the world. It is very important for the state of Israel," quote unquote. So it's a facade that Israel believes gets them out of war crimes trials, which if there is justice, will not happen. Before we go to the first film, I just want to set up this operation in Jabalia, because we talked about this last week. We had 2 field reports of it. And before I break down this film, I just wanted to remind you of those elements of it. This was an attack on the 401st Armored Brigade, who has a history in Jabalia. In Jabalia, the Jabalia Battalion had killed the commander of the 401st Armored Brigade about a year ago, 3 months into his tour in Jabalia. He was killed by the resistance. And the IDF investigation into this operation that we're going to watch it draws on a few key details. The first one is that the operation was effectively a breaching operation. The Qassam Brigade's fighters advanced into a defensive position that the Israeli military had set up, an outpost that tanks were guarding. The operation was executed at 6 a.m. in the morning, 1 hour after the tanks had moved into position from their morning routine in what the IDF calls, quote, dawn readiness, with commanders in situational assessments and forces on the highest alert. This is the context of the operation, where at least 3 of the 4-man 𝐤𝐿 squad advanced into the Israeli defensive position and deposited a guerrilla action device through the open hatch of the Merkava tank turret. And the last thing that Army Radio points out is that the 𝐤𝐿 attack on the bunker and the approach to the tank were possible despite this dawn readiness, which is supposed to be the time of maximum alertness and vigilance. Security officials say this is exactly the scenario the forces train and prepare for: an attack on a bunker in by a guerrilla formation. And despite all of this high readiness and previous attacks, the 𝐤𝐿 fighters managed to carry out a successful attack. That's what Army Radio noted, that despite their best efforts, 𝐤𝐿 still defeated them in this operation, and this video was released this week. So let's take a look at it here. We're seeing the fighters here preparing the Bark guerrilla action device. This is the new guerrilla action device that we've seen them manufacturing. It's a little difficult to see. The camera work on this one isn't what we are used to from 𝐤𝐿, but we see here 3 fighters preparing this operation, and they are going to, again, breach an Israeli defensive position. There hasn't been fighting in Gaza. The Israelis are behind defensive positions. There we see the tank that is the target. Can see how close the fighters are able to get up to that tank. And now we're going to watch here. You can see the fighter crossing that open space, and he's literally going to climb up on top of this tank. You can see him there in shadow. We'll show you later a closer look at that, but you can see him there. He takes the Bark. He's right on top. There he takes a shot, and the Israeli soldiers inside of the base fire on him. But you can see with the cameraman as well that both were able to dismount from the tank and run, and that is the detonation of the Bark, the lightning guerrilla action device. It killed the 4 soldiers inside instantly. Again, you could see in that angle the shot that may have hit the 𝐤𝐿 fighter. There was one report in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿 that said that a 𝐤𝐿 fighter was killed, but that doesn't match with the Israeli investigation that said no fighters were killed, and that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 report was the only one that said someone died. The IDF investigation said that they looked through the area and did a sweep and found nobody. This last frame here says, he who repeats the same mistakes falls into the same traps, basically. It doesn't have a direct translation, but it's essentially referring to the fact that 𝐤𝐿 keeps catching these guys with their hatches open. Maybe we can take one more look at it now that we know what we're looking at, because it's a pretty impressive operation to breach the Israeli position at their highest readiness. So it's not a sneak attack in the sense, it's a frontal attack, and the resistance still 23 months into the war are able to execute this. You can see the 3 fighters, and there's 2 cameramen that we're going to see here. So this is the shot of the tank. You can see it from the side angle there of the tank, and you can see the commander. At one point, the commander's head is popped out of the hatch, and we have seen that many times. We've seen snipers fire on them with their riding outside the hatch. We've seen Yasin strikes with the soldiers outside the hatch. Again, you can see the shadow of the fighter getting up here, and you're going to see the ping of a soldier firing on him there. But you see him jump down. He's able to jump down and run away. So are the other cameramen are able to run away. So I believe that we had everybody return to their base safely here. The Israeli military said that there was a trail of blood, presumably from the fighters. And then the Israelis panicked, and they all started firing at each other. And an Israeli soldier was wounded by friendly fire in that panic. So you can see those are a pretty significant IED that they have manufactured in the war. This IED did not exist before the war. There you're seeing the ammo cook off in the tank. The IDF said the 4 soldiers were killed immediately. If we take a look at number 9, you can see the guerrilla action device there. We've been tracking these. This is now half a dozen of these we've seen from southern Gaza all the way up to the north in Jabalia here. And the next slide, you can see him climbing up on the tank with a handy little circle that we've put on there so that you can see that he's able to get up on the hatch. And this is the first operation of an IED deposited inside a tank turret hatch. We've seen previously them doing it to Namr troop carriers. So that is the operation that was from earlier this month in Jabalia. If we take a look at number 11, we can see what was predicted. I alerted people to the fact that there would probably not be a lot of on-the-ground fighting from the end of Gideon's Chariots number 1 to the beginning of the Gaza City invasion, and that has been true. But we still see a number of operations. We see standoff fire, artillery fire. This is Saraya's mortar unit from the Central Brigade firing on Tel al-Montar in Shujaiya, on the eastern edge of Shujaiya. And you're going to see after he launches these 60-millimeter mortars that they're landing these. You can see them here. You can see the excavator, the Israeli position. They're landing all of these mortars all in and around their targets. So whenever we do get to see where they land, we're always seeing them be very close with them. And that makes sense after 2 years of these artillery units. These are dedicated units. This is as I said, this is from the Central Brigade firing on an IDF position in Shujaiya. And just as we were going on the air, the Israeli military admitted to an operation in Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip, what they suspect was a tunnel operation, and was part of 3 operations in Rafah just today against these units. So they said at Rafah, the Rafah Brigade was defeated. It's been ethnically cleansed, but there's fighters still accessing via tunnel and hitting the Israelis. 4 soldiers were killed. 3 more were wounded in their Humvee in an IED attack. And this was 1 kilometer from the Philadelphia corridor, which is on the border with Egypt. So the resistance hasn't claimed that operation yet. We'll see who executed that operation, but in an area that the Israelis believe that they had full control over. They were sending cadets into that area. They've sent media in soft-skin vehicles into that area, but the resistance caught them that time. If we look at number 12, we also have 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞 carrying out rocket operations. And this rocket operation was also from the northern central camps just south of Gaza City. You can see them calibrating there using wooden makeshift launchers. And then those Qassam rockets there, they either look brand new or someone painted them. If they're building rockets during the war, we're definitely going to see it. We've been looking for that throughout this. You can see they're pretty good shape, those rockets. And the fighter here is going to write 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞 on the rocket before launching it. The Israelis said that one of these rockets were intercepted. The other one was not intercepted. And these are the kind of operations that we have seen this week. There was 7 mortar and rocket operations this week, but there was also a couple Yassins, one Yassin operation versus a tank and one versus an APC in Khan Yunis, along the 2 corridors in Khan Yunis. There was 2 IEDs versus tanks in Jabalia, and an IED hit a tank in Sheikh Radwan in Gaza City. And then today, just as we're going on air, we're hearing about this operation in Rafah that hit a Humvee. So operations are still going on, but once the battle in Gaza City begins, which it has not yet, and the Israelis are saying that this is a gradual operation, so they're going to take their time with this, but it seems that we have on deck here a many months operation, several months of clearing. And if we look at the other operations of much smaller areas, and area like Khan Yunis, which is separated and is easier for the Israeli military to hold. That operation was 5 months. So you could assume based on that what we are looking at in Gaza City. So we will keep following that each week. Just a little check-in on the West Bank here. Nora talked about this operation as well, but there was an IED operation in Tulkarm. 2 soldiers were wounded in their Panther armored personnel carrier last week, and medevac helicopters had to take them out. That is one of 260 IED operations against Israeli troops since October 2023, according to the Palestine Information Center. And if we look at number 13 here, you can see that 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐄𝐿 that's the Panther. That's a Panther vehicle in flames there. And that's Abu Shuja, who was the commander of the Tulkarm Brigade. And it says, playing off his name, which means the brave, it says, the brave will remain a horror that haunts you, or a horror that chases you. And 𝐄𝐿 𝐄𝐿 put that video out there. Also, Nora reported on the after effect of that, which was a mass arrest in Tulkarm that looked, well, the Israelis wanted you to watch it because they arrested 1,000 people and made them all walk through town with their hands on each other's shoulders in a parade, which is a war crime. And that took the number, it was 1,000 arrested in less than a day. And as Nora also pointed out, there's been 19,000 arrests in the West Bank. Since the war started, there's 11,000 Palestinians in Israeli prison service behind bars right now in the West Bank. That doubles the number from before the war, and it does not include anyone arrested in Gaza. And we know the number, we don't know the number in Gaza, but we know that it's many thousands have been arrested in Gaza, almost uniformly civilians taken from shelters. Let's take a quick look at Yemen, where actually when we were just on air as well, a drone struck Eilat. If we look at number 14, Abdulmalik al-Houthi spoke today and talked about there have been 24 missile and drone operations. You can see there on the bottom, that is the Yafa drone. And the ballistic missile that you see there is the Palestine 2 ballistic missile that now has just recently added a cluster munition warhead, where you can see the 𝐓𝐴 at the top there. The re-entry vehicle is a cluster munition, and that's the Yafa drone at the bottom of there. So 24 missile and drone operations in the past week, Abdulmalik al-Houthi said, and that didn't account the 2 that just happened while we were on air. That takes the number to 67 in the past 3 weeks. There's been steady attacks, drone attacks in particular, on the Israelis. If we look at number 15, we got footage from the Israelis. There you can see the Yafa drone. That's a good shot of the Yafa drone. It had penetrated Israeli airspace, and the Israelis shot it down. But we know it hit Ramon International Airport in Eilat last week. But that was just a good shot of the Yafa drone there you can see. And then number 16 is just to give you a look at that drone. Again, that this drone was unveiled by the Yemeni Armed Forces on the 23rd of July, 2024. So last summer, it has 14 hours of endurance, 50-kilogram warhead, as we saw when it hit Ramon Airport, and 6-meter wingspan, 2,500-kilometer range, which puts most of central Israel well within target of this. And if we look at the last slide, number 17, you can see the rocket booster again of the Yafa drone. And that is the resistance report for day 713 of Israel's genocidal war on Gaza.
Thank you, as always, John, and to Tamara, for all the work that you guys do every week, putting that report together. I mean, just the images of tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people having to once again leave their homes or shelters in Gaza City and elsewhere in the north. And then, as the media office said, many of them had to go back to the north because they couldn't even find any space or adequate infrastructure in places in the south. And this is, of course, Israel's plan of building literal concentration camps in the Al-Mawasi area and western Gaza. I mean, where does this go? How?
It's not clear because they don't have a plan.
No.
They're
Yeah.
they're not allowing the aid agencies that could be
Right.
properly taking care of people. They're not allowing that aid in. They only allow their aid through the GHF for the most part.
Right.
And
Which is inadequate and rotten and lethal when people try to get. I mean, still, I didn't even put it in the report this week because there's so much else, but still, people are being shot and killed, hunted, trapped at these so-called GHF sites.
And
The
they can't
Gaza
even,
Holocaust Foundation.
Yeah.
they can't even manage 4 of them.
Right.
And
And
they're
they wanna-
talking about increasing the
To
numbers.
16?
But it's not clear how this is going to work because Mawasi is not able to support life.
Yeah.
It
It never was. It's the sand dunes.
yeah.
It's not connected to any grids, you know, even though any infrastructure grids all over Gaza have been obliterated. I mean,
It's so striking from those maps that you put up at the
Yeah.
beginning, John, that the Israelis are literally driving the Palestinians into the sea. I mean, this is the logic of what's happening.
every accusation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's a difficult moment. There's no question about it because Israel seems intent on erasing Gaza City, and that's going to be a many month process, and it's completely separate from fighting the resistance. Israel's trying to have something they can sell as a victory.
Yeah.
But their only thing that they have been able to accomplish is genocide, which they are doing a fairly good job of that. But every other aspect of their military campaign has been a failure. Even naming this Gideon's Chariots 2 after the army itself admitted that Gideon's Chariots 1 was a failure. They're back in Gaza City, a place where they, use their tanks to draw Star of David in December of 2023 because they said they conquered it. So they're just back in these areas that they said that they already defeated. We get resistance operations in Rafah, which has already been ethnically cleansed. I don't think there is a plan, and Israel doesn't have a plan themselves.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they're floating this number. I think you mentioned it, 20,000 Israeli troops to quote unquote conquer Gaza City.
At least there's 2 divisions right now going in, which would number more than that, and then the idea is to rotate other divisions in, because these are sort of the lessons learned about their military is that their fighters can't handle staying in the battle for long, and they need to rotate out, and so effectively they're going to bring these extra soldiers, extra divisions in so that they can rotate soldiers out when they've been in for 1 month. These are just ways to keep their soldiers on the battlefield. It took 5 divisions for them to take Gaza City the first time. So,
right.
Yeah. Right. But none of this, it doesn't match a military plan. What we're seeing is a war against civilians, and that's why
it's just the unrelenting slaughter of children.
Yeah,
and that's the victory that Israel can claim. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up, Asa or John, about the operations in Gaza, or I mean, what can we expect in the next week? I mean, as this invasion, planned invasion, continues to roll out in whatever form it is.
Well, they're trying to drive out as many people as they can out of Gaza City. So I would anticipate, I mean, the planned beginning, when they intended to begin this operation, was October 7th as a symbolic, date for them. It's just that they still haven't been able to win a war that they assumed they would win in months. Right. So yeah, they're going to target. I mean, they've got this new strategy they're calling the alarm clock, which is sort of the cousin, they say, of knocking on the roof, where they used to drop an inert bomb on a roof to get people to leave the house, that they're going to flatten. Now they're doing these operations that they're calling alarm clock operations, where they drop heavy munitions beside tent camps to scare people into moving. Because they need, according to their battle plan, they need to empty Gaza City of its population. And the only way that they can do that is through massacres. And we have seen that all throughout the war. Every evacuation notice comes with massacres. The massacres come before the evacuation notices even. It's not a true evacuation where they say you have this much time to leave. The massacres begin before the evacuation notices are falling from the sky, because the massacres are part of the they're part of the Zionist project since day one. To create terror with the massacres and hope that will drive people out. I mean, it's literally how they built their state.
Well, I know you'll be watching, and so will all of us. And at this point, I don't know. The news is it's so relentlessly horrific. I mean, just these massacres, and now that there's a communications blackout in Gaza City, a lot of the slaughtering is going to be done.
I remember there was the first communications blackout at the end of 2023, and that was so, at the time, that raised a lot of alarm bells.
That's right. I mean, that's another
widely,
tactic.
And now it's not even remarked upon.
Right.
You know,
Unbelievable. All right. Well, thank you for that, Jon and Asa. And of course, we're continuing to send our condolences to our colleague Ali. Tomorrow, let's take a look at the website. Usually this is the point in the show when Ali gets to thank everybody. So I will just do that on his behalf. In general, thank you so much for continuing to support the Electronic Intifada. In these just absolutely dark times. We are still working with our incredibly brave writers in Gaza to produce these extraordinary features. Please go to the website and check out the new features that we published this week. And as well as some of the news posts and analyses that our colleagues have published as well. I just want to thank Tamara, of course, our producer and director extraordinaire. We want to thank Ali. We want to thank Ellie Gerzon, Pierre Loisel, Maureen Claire Murphy, Michael F. Brown. Go to the Get Updates link at the very top left-hand corner of the Electronic Intifada website to sign up for our email list, electronicintifada.net. Click the Donate Now link at the top right to keep this publication going. And on behalf of myself and Tamara and Jon and Asa, thank you all, and we will see you next week.